From a young age, we're taught to believe that family love is unconditional, but what if that love never really existed? This is the story of a woman who grew up in someone else's shadow, overlooked, undervalued, and used as a stepping stone for the success of the one who always had it all. Lauren learned early on that to her parents, she was nothing more than a backup plan, an emotional reserve only acknowledged when the favorite daughter couldn't shine. But what happens when that invisible person decides to say no? When she chooses to break the chains, cut ties, and finally find her own voice? Get ready to dive into an emotional journey filled with deafening silences, painful confrontations, and bold decisions. A path marked by rejection, but also by strength, resilience, and above all, freedom. Because sometimes winning isn't about shouting louder, it's simply about walking away. And in this story, walking away isn't cowardice, it's victory. In the end, what seemed like just a family dispute becomes a powerful reunion with one's true identity. If you've ever felt small in your own home, this video is for you. Because today, Lauren is no longer the backup plan. Today, she's the main character of her own story. Lauren was born in a small town in upstate New York, and from a very young age, she sensed that something was off about how she was treated at home. While other kids received hugs, kisses, and words of encouragement from their parents, she grew up surrounded by silence, constant comparisons, and an absence that hurt more than any punishment. When her younger sister Brooke was born, everything became even clearer. Brooke was cheerful, outgoing, and seemed to be everything their parents had hoped for, or at least that's what they always said. No matter how kind or hard-working Lauren was, she never seemed to be enough. It was like she was always in the background. If she got good grades, the response was a cold, "That's your job." If she helped around the house, it was met with, "Well, it's not like you're doing anything else." All the proud smiles were saved for Brooke, who stole the spotlight at school plays, church events, and family gatherings. Lauren learned not to expect applause. She learned not to expect anything. And eventually she started to wonder if the problem was her. Her childhood was marked by small, invisible wounds. The drawing she proudly placed on the fridge would be replaced within a day by a picture of her sister. Her quiet birthday wishes were always drowned out by some event involving Brooke. Even new clothes always went to the younger sibling first. Lauren got the hand-me-downs. It felt like she was just a guest in her own home. Someone who was physically there, but never truly belonged. Things only got worse during her teenage years. The comparisons became crueler. Brooke's beauty was praised while Lauren was called plain. Her sister's grades were celebrated, while hers were barely acknowledged. When she finally tried to talk to her parents about how she felt, they accused her of being ungrateful, dramatic, and overly sensitive. "You're the one who distances yourself," they said. "But how do you get close to people who've never really seen you?" Despite it all, Lauren never rebelled. On the contrary, she became even more dedicated. She began to excel academically and dreamed of leaving home and building a life far away from there. But inside, she carried a quiet sadness, a hollow feeling she couldn't quite explain, a constant sense of not belonging, like she was always trying to fit into a puzzle that wasn't made for her. That beginning shaped who Lauren would become. A strong woman, yes, but also one who was used to fighting alone, to silencing her own pain, and to accepting emotional crumbs as if they were feasts. All because she just wanted one thing: to be seen, to be loved, to be recognized as someone who mattered. Lauren's teenage years were a magnified reflection of her childhood. The more she tried to be seen, the more invisible she felt. She was the model student, diligent, responsible, the kind who stayed up late studying and still found time to help around the house. When she achieved something meaningful, like taking first place at the science fair or earning a merit medal in math, she always held on to a quiet hope. Maybe this time there'd be a proud look, a kind word, maybe even a simple congratulations. But the awards ended up tucked away in drawers, often ignored, as if none of it had any real worth. Meanwhile, every small achievement by Brooke was celebrated as if it were monumental. If she got an average grade, their parents acted like it was a major success. If she entered a contest even without winning, there'd be gifts, parties, and sweet posts on social media. Lauren watched it all in silence, and with every comparison, subtle or blatant, her self-esteem took another hit. The turning point came during her senior year of high school. Lauren was accepted into a public university to study business administration, an incredible feat for someone who attended a public school and worked part-time to help with the bills. When she shared the news at dinner, she expected at least a congrats. Instead, her father said, "And how are you going to support yourself there? Gonna throw everything away just for a degree?" Her mother added, "You should think twice about your choices, honey. College isn't everything." That night, Lauren went up to her room, holding back tears. It wasn't just the lack of support, it was the cruel indifference of people who seemed determined to downplay everything she worked so hard to achieve. Her parents' words echoed like sharp blades, dramatic, ungrateful, never satisfied. She stopped sharing her victories. She kept her straight-A report cards to herself, tucked away the praise from teachers, and stopped announcing her progress. There was no point in proving her worth to people who refused to see it. This emotional pattern, repeated year after year, left Lauren with an invisible scar. The deep-rooted feeling that nothing she did would ever be enough. That she'd have to be perfect, or better yet, be Brooke, to earn even a glimpse of attention. It felt like she was auditioning for a role that had already been cast. And the harder she tried, the more defeated she felt. Still, Lauren kept going. Quietly, she held on to the hope that one day she'd be recognized, that someday, maybe she'd hear those simple words, "We're proud of you." Not for doing something amazing, but just for being herself. That fragile hope was what kept her moving forward, step by step, toward a life where, just maybe, she'd finally be the main character in her own story. When Lauren finally started college, her biggest fear wasn't the challenging coursework or adjusting to life in a big city. It was doing it all alone. Unlike her sister, who had both financial and emotional support at every step, Lauren had to sacrifice a lot just to keep studying. She rented a small room in a student boarding house, lived off frozen meals, and stretched every dollar to cover rent, transportation, and textbooks. She worked as a bookstore clerk during the day and attended classes at night. Her late nights were spent writing papers and reports, and weekends were rarely restful. It was exhausting, but she kept going. Every exam she passed felt like a quiet victory. Every semester she finished was one more step toward the dream of a different life. The hardest part, though, was the emotional loneliness. Holidays came and went, and so did the absence of her family. While her classmates traveled home to see their parents on long weekends, Lauren stayed in the city. Sometimes she'd call home, hoping to share a success, a worry, a moment of exhaustion, and was usually met with cold responses or comments like, "Brooke is doing that too," or "Brooke is doing great in her new program." The comparisons never stopped. It seemed like no matter what Lauren did, her parents couldn't see her efforts. What hurt the most was that, even while being ignored, she still longed for that connection. She missed her childhood, even the sad parts, and often wondered if things would ever change. If one day her mom might call just to ask how she was, but those calls never came. Over time, Lauren began to find support elsewhere. She built real friendships in college and met professors who admired her discipline and resilience. These were the relationships that helped her stay grounded. She created a routine built on organization and the goal of graduating with strong grades, and maybe, just maybe, landing a solid job afterward. The mission was clear: break free from the cycle of invisibility, and create a meaningful life. But every achievement still came with a bittersweet aftertaste. She knew that as far as her family was concerned, she'd always be the other daughter. Brooke's name still dominated Sunday dinners, their parents' social media posts, and every future plan. Lauren no longer fooled herself into hoping for belonging, but it still hurt. It hurt to know that love in that house had a name, and it wasn't hers. In the end, it was that emptiness that shaped her. The absence taught her not to rely, not to expect. Lauren didn't become cold, but she learned to stand firm. She realized she had to be her own foundation, that if she wanted to build something real, it had to start from within, facing her pain without filters, without pretending. This was the beginning of a woman learning to be enough for herself. For Lauren, graduation wasn't just an event, it was a milestone, the end of years of silent struggle and the beginning of a new chapter. For months, she carefully prepared. She picked out her dress with care, paid for the photos in installments, attended every committee meeting despite her busy schedule, and quietly dreamed, just a little, that maybe this time she'd be recognized. Deep down, there was still a sliver of hope. Maybe her parents would finally see her differently. Maybe watching their daughter walk across the stage and receive her diploma would change something. But when the big day arrived, so did another disappointment. Her family showed up, yes, but with the same disinterest as always. Brooke arrived late, wearing a long white dress that turned every head, effortlessly stealing the spotlight. During the ceremony, as Lauren stepped on stage to accept her diploma, her parents were too busy chatting with another couple. No photos, no tears of pride, not even a moment of acknowledgement. At the celebratory dinner afterward, all eyes were on Brooke's latest plans. She was starting a new project, a gourmet cafe, and everyone at the table was buzzing with excitement. Lauren's graduation was mentioned briefly, almost like an afterthought. When Brooke raised her glass for a toast, it wasn't to honor her sister's achievement. It was to celebrate her next entrepreneurial step. Once again, Lauren was pushed aside at her own celebration, and that's when something inside her finally broke. When her father casually remarked, "Well, she actually managed to graduate," and her mother gave a half-hearted smile, Lauren raised her glass, looked around the table, and said with a steady voice, "Thank you for coming, but I expected more from you. I thought today, of all days, might actually be about me." The room fell silent. Brooke tried to lighten the moment with a joke, but Lauren didn't laugh. She stood up, thanked them again, and left. That night, alone in the tiny room barely big enough for her books, she cried. But it wasn't the usual sadness. It was mourning, the end of an illusion, the death of the hope that one day her family would truly embrace her. For the first time, Lauren understood the truth. The problem was never her, and that realization, while painful, also brought a strange kind of peace. She owed them nothing anymore. Graduation was the final break. The moment she stopped trying, stopped hoping, stopped chasing approval. From that day forward, she would live for herself, by her own rules, no longer burdened by the need to please those who never cared to be pleased. It was time to be free. And even if she didn't know exactly how, Lauren was finally ready to begin. Graduating college wasn't just the end of an academic journey for Lauren. It marked the beginning of a personal transformation. For the first time, she felt like she didn't owe anyone an explanation. She woke up early for her job at a mid-sized company as a junior analyst, handled complex reports and demanding targets, but faced everything with a new lightness. It was different fighting for something when no one expected anything from her. The victory was hers alone. This new chapter brought a sense of belonging. At work, she was valued. She received praise, was heard in meetings, and invited to participate. In key projects, For the first time, she wasn't Brooke's sister. She was just Lauren, with her own name and identity. More than that, she was beginning to grow roots in herself. She cared for her small apartment, decorating it slowly with second-hand pieces that carried stories and meaning. She started cooking for herself, going out with friends and making plans for herself, by herself. It was during this period that Brooke reappeared, always with that air of superiority, a mix of forced sweetness and veiled sarcasm. This time she had a proposition. She wanted Lauren's help running her new gourmet cafe. She said she needed someone she could trust, someone with a technical background, someone who gets spreadsheets. But she was clear. There would be no salary at first. It would be something between sisters. Lauren took a deep breath. That offer was just another echo of the same old family dynamic, her as the invisible structure behind Brooke's shine. But this time, she wasn't the girl who silently accepted everything. She was a woman with a respectable job, with stability, with freedom. Calmly and respectfully, Lauren said no. She explained that she was focused on her own growth and that it made no sense to give up everything she had built to step back into a role she never wanted. Brooke tried to push, played on emotions, even pulled the classic guilt trip move. "You've always been distant. I'm just trying to bring us closer." But Lauren didn't budge. That decision marked the start of her true freedom. Because more than saying no to her sister, she was saying yes to herself. It wasn't about rejecting family. It was about choosing herself. For the first time, she didn't feel guilty for prioritizing her own dreams. She didn't apologize for being firm. And that new stance didn't just unsettle Brooke. It shook the very structure the family had relied on for so long, that Lauren would always be there to serve. She wasn't anymore. The woman emerging from that moment was shaped by years of pain, but also by resilience. And even though she didn't yet know what the future held, Lauren was sure of one thing: she would never again be used as a ladder for someone else to climb. Lauren's refusal was the first real no Brooke had ever heard from her, and like someone who never learned to handle boundaries, Brooke reacted with a mix of shock, anger, and contempt. What was supposed to be a simple business proposal quickly turned into a minefield of accusations. Brooke couldn't accept that her sister had changed, or worse, that she was thriving on her own. In the days that followed, the passive-aggressive comments started rolling into the family group chats. Phrases like, "Some people forget where they came from," or "Not everyone's a team player," popped up out of nowhere, but they were clearly aimed. Lauren ignored them. She no longer let things like that get under her skin. But everything escalated once Brooke's cafe finally opened. The new business was all polished aesthetics, handcrafted desserts in the display case, inspirational quotes painted on the walls, a carefully curated image built around family, values, tradition, and mutual support. But behind the scenes, Brooke was struggling financially and operationally, and that's when the arrogance hit harder. Instead of asking for help with humility, she decided to spin the story. On the cafe's public Instagram page, Brooke posted, "Sometimes the people we love the most don't show up for us, but we keep going with those who believe in our dream." It sounded like a motivational quote, but it was a clear jab. Family, friends, and acquaintances started chiming in, and Brooke made sure to fuel the drama, replying with sad emojis, cryptic messages, and even subtle mentions of the sister who turned her back. When Lauren saw it, she felt that old anger bubbling up again, but she took a deep breath. She knew where this road led, to another exhausting emotional loop. But this time, she had tools to handle it. She didn't have to swallow everything anymore. What she needed now was protection from them. The situation came to a head during a Sunday lunch, the first one Lauren had attended in months. In front of everyone, Brooke took the opportunity to lament the cafe's struggles and the lack of family support. She looked directly at Lauren, a veiled attack with no room for misinterpretation. When Lauren tried to explain her stance, their mother cut her off. "You could help a little, that's all. That's what family is, Lauren." It was in that moment that Lauren finally understood. No matter how far she came, to that family she would always be the fallback, the invisible support, the plan B. She stood up, looked everyone in the eye, and said, with a calm that even surprised her, "Family isn't just blood. Family is who respects you, and I won't stay silent anymore just to keep you comfortable." And she left. For the first time, she walked away without crying. After that lunch, things became unbearable. Wounded in her pride, Brooke went on the offensive. Subtle jabs on social media turned into direct attacks. In a public post on her cafe's page, she accused Lauren of sabotage, calling her toxic and jealous. She claimed Lauren had refused to help out of selfishness and painted her as cold, distant, and incapable of love. The post went viral among their local community, and soon Lauren found herself at the center of a storm. Messages started flooding in. Some were supportive, but many were full of judgment, as if she were the villain in a story they barely understood. That's when Lauren realized the full depth of the emotional trap her family had set for her. Not only did they refuse to support her, now they were trying to destroy her reputation. And this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. With the calm determination she'd gained, Lauren decided to take legal action for defamation. It wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. She gathered screenshots, collected testimonies, consulted lawyers, and filed a formal lawsuit against her sister. As expected, the family took Brooke's side. Her father called her cruel, and her mother accused her of tearing the family apart. But Lauren stood firm. For the first time, she was using the law as a shield, not a weapon. The case brought to light truths that had been buried for years. In court, standing before a judge, she spoke about years of emotional neglect, invisibility, and veiled abuse. It wasn't just about a social media post. It was about everything that came before it. Her childhood, her teenage years, a young adulthood defined by exclusion and open wounds. For the first time, someone neutral heard her story. And in that sterile, formal setting, Lauren felt something she'd never felt before: validation. The verdict came months later. Brooke was ordered to delete the post, pay damages for emotional harm, and issue a public apology. But the most important victory wasn't written on legal documents. It was inside Lauren. She had taken a stand, faced the storm, and come out stronger. Not just in court, but in her own journey toward healing. After the ruling, she cut all ties with her family. Quietly, without drama, she blocked numbers, left group chats, and most importantly, freed herself emotionally. The pain still lingered, of course. But now it came with something new: lightness. Yes, the truth hurt. Reliving it all, facing it head-on, reopening old wounds. It was exhausting, but that pain was also liberating because it was real. And only by confronting the truth was Lauren finally able to start writing her own story, without interference, without twisted versions, without manipulation. The invisible girl from a small town was now a whole woman, one who no longer stayed silent, one who didn't have to prove her worth to anyone, and above all, one who had learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. With the legal battle behind her, the emotional ties cut, and her spirit finally lighter, a new chapter began in Lauren's life. Without telling anyone, she accepted a job offer abroad. A Spanish multinational company, impressed by her resume and the way she carried herself in interviews, offered her a position in Barcelona. The salary was excellent, the challenges were big, but most importantly, it was a chance to start over in a place where no one knew her story, her past, or her pain. The move happened quickly. In less than 3 months, Lauren was settled into a small apartment with a balcony in the Gracia neighborhood. It was modest, but charming. Every piece of furniture, every plant, every picture on the wall was chosen by her. For the first time, she felt like she was building something of her own, from the ground up. No pressure, no expectations, no comparisons. She wandered the cobblestone streets with a soft smile, discovering cafes, bookstores, and museums. Everything was new, and yet it finally felt like hers. At work, she was met with respect and appreciation. She was given autonomy to lead projects, built genuine relationships with colleagues from all over the world, and little by little shed the version of herself that was always afraid of not being enough. In Barcelona, Lauren didn't have to prove anything. She simply got to be. Mornings on the balcony became a sacred ritual. With a cup of coffee and a book in her lap, she watched the sun rise between the colorful low-rise buildings, letting the silence wrap around her like a hug. The absence of yelling, of judgment, of accusatory glances was so profound that sometimes it brought her to tears. But they were different tears, tears of peace. One morning, she received an envelope from Brazil, no return address, a simple piece of paper folded in four. Inside, a single handwritten sentence: "You won, congratulations." No name, no clue who had sent it. It could have been someone from her family, maybe an old friend, or even someone who had quietly watched her journey from afar. But at that moment, it didn't matter. Lauren smiled, because that sentence, whoever it came from, simply echoed what she already knew. Winning wasn't about defeating others. It was about overcoming yourself, breaking the cycle, choosing not to become bitter even when you have every reason to, still believing in love, even if it doesn't come in the traditional form. On that balcony in Barcelona, Lauren found what years of forced family dinners never gave her: peace, a sense of belonging, and pride in who she was. She no longer needed an audience. She no longer sought validation. She had built a life where her presence mattered, her worth was clear, and most importantly, where she could finally be herself, unapologetically. Because in the end, the greatest trophy isn't a medal or a diploma, it's freedom. Sometimes life feels like a crowded room where you scream and no one hears you, where you flip on the lights and no one sees. Lauren lived like that for years, trying to be seen, trying to be loved, trying to be enough. But the day she stopped screaming for others was the day she started hearing herself. This story isn't just about a woman who cut ties, it's about someone who found the courage to choose herself. And if you've ever felt like you're always second, best maybe it's time to do the same. To stop chasing recognition in places where there's only silence. To realize that your peace doesn't need anyone's permission. If this story touched you in any way, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this too. And if you want more real, powerful, life-changing stories, subscribe to the channel now. Here we talk about pain, but also about healing, about new beginnings, and above all about freedom, because everyone deserves to be the main character in their own life.